Let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everyone to this workshop of the Temple City Council for July 1st, 2021. Currently it is 3 p.m. Do we have anybody sign up? Okay, then let's move right on to the work session. Item number 1 is to discuss maybe needed any regular meeting agenda items for the meeting post for Thursday, July 1st, 2021. Council or staff first, is there anything that we need to discuss?
Yeah, I have two things on item H on the consent agenda, which is the second reading of the updates to chapter 14, the local food unit provisions. I just wanted to make you aware that we did draft the language that we talked about at your first reading, where we updated the ordinance to allow for serving and storage of the food outside of the mobile food unit. So we made it as permissive as possible while still complying with state law. And we also updated, after some additional feedback, the generator standard to 65 decibels instead of 60, which still meets the quiet generator standard, industry standards. And we also changed the setback requirements from 20 feet to 10 feet. I think that's all the changes.
We didn't actually put a specific amount of the setback requirements from the local unit to the building rather in the chapter. I just put it so it would be as the fire marshal requires or fire marshal policy to allow the fire marshal to adjust based on what they felt like needed in a particular situation.
Thank you.
Is that acceptable?
I also believe that there was interest in talking about item number 8, which is the Kedley Road reconstruction. And David has a short presentation.
So the goal of this presentation, what I want to walk you through real quick is just kind of what the process was overall with Kegley, and then how we got to where we got. So when we talk about pavement design, what we're going to be talking about primarily today is potential vertical rise, PVR is what you'll see, that term. You see it, you may hear that if you've had foundation work done at your home or anything. But as everyone knows, we have expansive clay soils in a lot of central Texas. The picture you see on the right shows what happens to those soils as they dry out, they shrink. And then as they get wet again, they expand. So when we talk about PVR, what we're really talking about is under a particular moisture condition, what is the potential for that soil to raise vertically? So we're going to talk about that in inches, and you'll see a few options that we're talking about here shortly. Another thing I want to run through real quick, just laying some groundwork. When we talk about roadways, we talk about it in multiple courses. You have a surface course, that's typically the asphalt that you see on the surface. You have a base course below that. That base course in this area is typically crushed limestone. And then there are a few layers of sub-base and sub-grade below that. If you really get down into it, there's a few things we can talk about, but we're going to talk largely about sub-grade below that. So that's the soil that's below the crushed limestone and the asphalt that we're using to drive on. When we talk about Kegley in particular, we had a pavement section that's common amongst the base bid and all of the add alternates. So we have a base bid that requires a surface course that has 2 different types of asphalt, a little over 6 inches, 6.5 inches thick. You have a base course that has 11 inches of crushed limestone base. And then below that in our subgrade area, we're going to see in the base bid plus the add-alts some different recommendations for what you do with that subgrade course. So our base bid just has our standard section. Add-alt 1 was the base bid plus in this the subgrade course here, it was 1 foot of remove and replace. So we're taking out those clay soils that expand and shrink and we're replacing them with what we call select fill. That's a more stable material that doesn't move quite as much. Adult 2 was to remove and replace 2 feet of clay soil. And then adult 3 was to remove and replace 3 feet of clay soil. We have a geotechnical study that talks about the improvements you see from your base section down through adults 1 and 2. Base section has a 3-inch potential vertical rise, PVR. So again, think about that in terms of on any given day, you could see some movement up to 3 inches up and down in that soil. 2.5 inches with remove and replace at 1 foot, 2 inches with remove and replace at 2 feet. And then our alternate 3 that we had, we're estimating somewhere around 1.5 inches of PVR. That one we don't have a direct scientific note to it, but if you assume that linear relationship, you're going to get somewhere between 1.5 and to 1.75 inches on your PVR for that last piece. So this is what we consider as we look at the bids, and as you decrease your PVR, you are increasing, or you're also going to be decreasing maintenance long term. So we would be spending less money maintaining a road because the less it moves up and down, the less we would be having cracks that would come into the roadway, or we would be having other issues. One thing that you may,
Mr. Olson, question real quick. Under normal acceptable conditions of the road base, what PVR is acceptable?
so it's possible to design a roadway section. So the roadway section is designed to withhold up to the 3 inches of PVR. Now, the difference that you're going to get in that is what is the ride quality on that roadway. So for this, I'll let you think. Most folks have probably driven up and down the toll road 130 going around Austin, and you notice that as you're driving down that road, you get a lot of up and down movement in your vehicle as you're driving down that roadway. And what you're seeing there is that roadway was designed with a higher PVR. So it has more vertical rise. The pavement section itself hasn't completely failed. So there are more cracks in it probably than you'd like to see. But the pavement section hasn't failed. It's a reduction in ride quality. You can think about that a little bit too as you think about the current Kegley Road. It's got a lot of up and down in it. Some of that's potholes that have come up over time, but that starts with the vertical rise in the soil. More vertical rise you have, the more roller coaster effect you're going to have on the roadway as you drive.
So to maintain a smooth ride,
Right.
what sort of heave is acceptable? Depends.
Trey, you have any thoughts on that? I mean,
That's a
difficult
tough one.
It depends. Are you in East Bell County, Central Bell County, West Bell County?
Right.
East Bell County, 6 inches is fantastic. You get to College Station, it's even more, it's even okay. You got Textile who maintains a lot of roads, a lot of expenses, so their acceptable PVR is more. I would say in here somewhere probably between 2 and 4 inches would be something that you could do, because if you really think about it, you're talking that much or that much, and driving down the road, you really don't. It's not a we're going to go every 2 feet we're going to be doing this. It's usually a gradual rise and a gradual fall. So when you look at it from an aspect of rideability, you're not going to have it where it's like a ripple effect. It's going to be more of a, just like 130, like I-35 just north of Midway. Y'all drove that, and you kind of, many years ago, TxDOT went in there and took out a large section of dirt and replaced it because that bump got beyond the rideability. Like I said, the pavement structure never felt like they were saying, but that rideability got to be not a safe condition for the speeds they had out there. So I would say around here, probably 2 to 4 inches in this area. You go more west where there's less soils that are that have a lot less plasticity in them, that don't swell as much. You're probably going to get 1 inch to 1.5 inches, and that's just typical. You go East Bell County where you're in the fat clays and enjoy the roller coaster. That's just part of it. So I would say somewhere in this area, 2 to 4 inches would be something
Right. So I guess that's a good preface. Anything that we have from the base bid on is an acceptable design. So we can make any of those work. What the trade-off is going to be is as we decrease our PVR, we are going to decrease our long-term maintenance on that roadway. So the higher the PVR, the more likely it is to have that movement. It's going to start to develop what we call longitudinal cracking. And then we have to spend money to go back in, seal those cracks, and then put some sort of a surface treatment on that long-term to make sure the roadway maintains that structure. Because what would be detrimental is if we allow that cracking to occur, you allow the water to get in, that starts to really shrink and swell. The whole roadway then starts to fail at that point. So what you see here, starting with your base section, as you move down through the add alternates, we have a baseline level of maintenance here, and then every add alternate you move through, we're decreasing that level of maintenance that we're going to have to do over the life of that roadway, so 20 plus years.
Does you gave the example of I-30 or 130, whatever it is, which is fairly straight.
Right.
Kegley is not straight. Does that affect?
That doesn't affect it as much because soil goes where soil goes. There's lines where it changes from soil type to soil type, but those aren't just hard rigid lines. They're, like Trey was talking about, that happens over a period of distance. So it matters a little less straight or curvy.
Well, but you would want as much stability, I presume, on a curvy road. You don't want to feel like a washboard on a curvy road versus a straight road.
From the perspective of recommending what we're going to do, we're going to be looking at two things here. What's the initial upfront cost, and what is the projected maintenance? Upfront cost is easy to predict. Our projected maintenance is where it starts to get a little bit more difficult, because you're getting that crystal ball out at that point. You don't exactly know what it is. All we can say is that less movement, less maintenance. So every improvement that you make in less movement gives you an improvement in maintenance. Now, there are some cases, there's a limit to that. We can't go in, and if we go excavate 12 feet of material and backfill, you're going to hit a limit eventually where you're still going to get a certain amount of movement no matter what you do. But within the alternatives that we have, you have three alternatives that give, in my opinion, give you a decreasing level of maintenance with each alternative.
So phase one did not require.
In phase one, we didn't bid it this way. It was, we did over excavate, correct, Richard? Trey?
It was, that first phase had better soils under it. The farther you get into the Pepper Creek drainage basin,
Yeah, I think
it gets a lot worse. So that first phase, you didn't have the significant PIs. We talked about it, moving the soil based on PI. It was in the range that was normal that we could handle with the base section. So there really wasn't a significant overbuild that was needed. Now, it's a very thick pavement section. So if you drove out there and you say, oh, look, man, they must have replaced a lot of soil. I mean, I want to say it was 18, 20 plus inches. So you did see a lot of excavation, but that first phase from Adams 2305 back is a lot better soils. But as soon as once you start seeing the hackberry trees, that's when it starts transitioning into the more spotty conditions.
Once you get to where the creek.
Right.
Yeah.
So this just is a map that shows you the limits of what we're talking about here. It picks up where that first phase left off and extends down past both Wildflower entrances and to Blue Star here. Your base bid came in just over 5.9. If we're looking at alternative 3 with that alt 3, that's 300,000. As we look at it from a staff perspective, what we're looking at is, do we feel as though that additional amount of money is worth what we would save in maintenance over a 20-year life of the roadway? And I feel confident in saying yes. I think it's money well spent to save heartache down the line. when you look at the bids overall, we had 4 contractors that bid. And with the 4 different types of bidding, we ended up with 3 low bidders. You had Emerson Construction was the low bidder on strictly the base bid alone. If you look at base bid plus adult 1, you had RT Schneider was the low bidder. If you do base bid plus adult 2, then you have RT Schneider as well. And when you look at base bid plus adult 3, that was TTG Utilities. We've worked with all 3 of the contractors in the past that have a low bid on this. We've had no issue with any contractor. So we have a comfort level with any contractor there. What we boil down to then is just what level do we want to draw that line at. Again, you have four options here. You have your base bid with Emerson Construction at 5.73 million. You have your base bid plus adult 1, which was RT Schneider at 5.9 million. Adult 2 was just under 6.1 million. And adult 3 with TTG was just over 6.2 million. So you see there's a slight increase as you go down each one of those. What staff is recommending is that we consider the base bid plus add alternative 3. And that's just over 6.2 million again. Our OPC or budget on this item was 6.5 million. And the recommendation we received from KPA and city staff's recommendation were to go with adult 3 to award to TTG at 6.2 million.
In a project of this magnitude, how many, I know this is a crystal ball kind of thing, but change orders, how many change orders do you normally get on a project this size?
Trey, you have any thoughts on?
Hopefully 0.
Yeah.
In reality. Based off the engineering, it's 0.
Yeah.
So I would say that with this particular job, there is one unknown, a big unknown. There's some scour issues under the roadway by the bridge,
Scour.
where there's some sinkhole potholes over time. Pepper Creek gets built back up. You get some eddying and things like that, and it gets there's some eating out. We know that's an issue, but in order to investigate that issue, you've got to shut the road down and dig it up. Will we see some requests for some additional funds on that because we don't know until we peel that back? Potentially, yes. And so that's one factor to consider. But that would be on this job, that would be the one thing that I would say would be an unknown of a potential change order. Because typically on these type of road jobs, especially in these areas, it's pretty wide open and you're isolating things. So it's not like downtown when you peel back an asphalt parking lot and all of a sudden you find a basement you didn't know about, things like that, or a old heating tank, that had been sitting there for however many years. You're like, oh, well, so out in those areas where it's more roadway, more linear, and I would say the biggest unknown is how to deal with those areas that we have some scouring or some undercutting of the bridges in those areas. You'll have to stabilize those.
A reference that I usually like to use for situations like this, TxDOT, who does a significant amount of roadway work, typically has a goal established for 5% or less on change orders. So if you take 5% of a $6.2 million project, Tracy may beat me on this one, what, 3 to 350, 300,000, 350,000 would be your goal to be under that number.
Your limit's 25% too.
Right, and then we have a limit of 25% without having to rebid that project. But if we start getting in that range of more than 5%, that's when, we're going to be having conversations internally of what happened here. Is there a good reason for it? Is this something that we saw that was a good fix we could do along the way, or is it a contractor issue? We're going to have to explain those numbers as we get above that 5% margin.
I assume we've worked with TTG Utilities before?
Yes, ma'am. I'm struggling to recall exactly what project, but I know that they've done recent roadway projects for us.
Communication with them was good.
Richard, good?
What else?
This really helps. Thank you.
You bet.
Very much.
Thank you, David. Council, anything else before we move on to item 2? Anything else on the agenda? Item 2 is to receive a presentation regarding the rental reinvestment program. Ms. Glover.
Mayor and council. Understand, whatever your preference.
I'll
I'll just
move.
stand. I'll just stand. So, thank you all. I did present this to you all back in, I believe, either January or February. So this is going to be sort of a rerun. But there is a method to my madness. So just kind of bear with me. So we are proposing a rental reinvestment program, which is essentially a matching grant program that will encourage our landlords and our rental property owners to invest into their property in order to bring them up to HUD standards so that they can accept housing choice vouchers. In FY20, we had 39 housing choice vouchers that were left unused. And I think there's a little bit of a misconception about how that system works. So the Temple Housing Authority has their own voucher system. So they have vouchers that are associated specifically with their properties. And then the Central Texas Council of Governments manages the HUD program, the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, and that is associated with the tenant. So they can look for specific properties that they want to live in rather than being attached to one specific facility. So there were 39 that were unused in FY20. And the reason for that was that there were just not enough properties available that would pass a HUD inspection, or that the landlord was willing to accept those vouchers. So in answer to that, we sort of went to the drawing board and we decided that we really needed to develop an incentive program that would give them a little bit of funding to bring those properties up to those HUD standards, and in the long run, also improve the properties too. So we started identifying those potential properties through our neighborhood planning process. Buford and his team go out and do a really great job of grading properties, and we also identify which ones are rentals. So we sort of have an understanding of which ones would be good candidates for the program. And so with this incentive, we hope to make those improvements. These are some of the eligible improvements, and these are tied back to the HUD inspection list. There's a list of things that a property has to have in order to pass HUD inspection. So we would cover all of these things with a special focus on ADA accessibility improvements. That is one thing that we're severely short on, are ADA accessible units that are also eligible for vouchers. So the incentive, as I mentioned before, would be a matching grant, 50-50, up to $5,000 from the city for a total investment of $10,000. And the only contributions from the applicant that will be counted are the cash contributions. So if they got anything donated or any in-kind contributions to the project, that would not be counted towards their match. It has to be a 50-50 cash match up to $5,000 from the city. So this would run off of our regular fiscal year funding cycle from October 1st to September 30th. And each funding cycle, we will consider the successes of the previous cycle and determine whether or not we want to continue funding that program, but we are under no obligation to continue it after this first cycle. To be eligible, the applicant has to have rental property within the boundaries of the city limits,
And they also need to be within our low to moderate income neighborhoods as are identified by HUD. The way that the application process will work is that they will fill out an application and submit that to the Housing and Community Development Department, and we will help them complete their application if they need help. They cannot do any improvements on the property that count towards this program prior to application. They have to apply first, tell us what they're going to do. We all have to agree before any work can commence. A review committee will be established to vet the applications prior to presenting them to the neighborhood revitalization advisory board. That's a mouthful. And they will look at them and rate them and make a recommendation to council, or to Bryn rather, for approval. And then Bryn will put her stamp on them, and she will then pass that back off to us, and we'll create grant agreements with that applicant. There are some other criteria that we're just going to kind of look at as we look at the applications and we're rating the applications. We really want to pay attention to the condition of the property. We want to really try to make a difference in the overall appearance of the neighborhood while we're looking at these other improvements as well. So we want to do that. We want to look at need, the applicant's financial resources that they have to complete the project. They have to prove that they can do it. We also are going to be looking at any city infrastructure that may be improved as a part of that project, and whether the property is a part of the rental registration program that Buford and his team is putting together now. We definitely want to marry these two programs together. The property owner has to also agree to maintain HUD standards for a period of 5 years and agree to accept housing choice vouchers for the same amount of time. We will go to them annually for performance reports, and that is also something that they already will do as a housing choice voucher recipient. They have to do that reporting anyway, so it's not like we're going to ask them for anything that they're not already being required to provide. As for funding, as I mentioned, for the 50-50 matching grant on the city side, we will pay for this program using CDBG funds, and we already have a line item in the budget allocated to this program that will provide $85,000 in grant funds for this program. Next steps, this will go to council for adoption on July 15th. This will be in the consent agenda for your consideration. And then we intend to open applications up just to the general public. This is not going to be an application period. It's just until we run out of funding. But that will open on Monday, July 19th, if you all approve the program. And that's it. Question?
How are we going to let the landlords know about the availability?
So we intend to do some direct marketing specifically to some properties that we think are good candidates for the program, but we're also going to work with our marketing department. They're amazing. They're incredible at helping us get the word out in different ways. We'll do press releases and get it on the website. In fact, we talked about it in our marketing earlier, our marketing meeting earlier. So they'll help us really blast it out.
Nancy, the 39 vouchers, thank you, that were returned or not used in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that do you think was COVID, and how much was just landlords not having any interest? And how many were used?
So I was told that I don't know how many were actually used. The 39 that were left unused, I was told by SIGCOG, were directly related to not having a home available for that recipient. So the way that program works, the recipient of the voucher is responsible for finding a home on their own. They have 180 days to do it.
The recipient of the voucher is the landlord?
No. The person who has qualified for the program.
The rental.
Renter. Yes, the renter.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yes. And so they will go start the search for either an apartment or a home that they can rent that will accept the voucher. And then they have to go through that inspection to make sure that they qualify, that the home qualifies or the apartment qualifies. And so that was sort of the stop sign for those 39. They just weren't able to find a home that would be eligible.
So we have to have an agreeable landlord and a needy tenant.
And the landlord's property has to pass the inspection.
Right, which means it's failing in certain areas.
Exactly.
And it's still, those parameters are still exactly what you said,
Yes, ma'am.
still in place.
Yes, ma'am.
Does the voucher have to pay 100% of the rent?
It is not. The renter can make up the difference if they find one that's a little bit higher than what they do have to stay within the maximum median rental, rate for Temple. And, but the renter can make up that difference if they need to.
So that maximum median rate, is that two different things, maximum and median?
I guess the
Sounds like
maximum,
it.
the maximum for the median household rent, I guess, or the median
I think I was
household
fine with that.
income, maximum rent, maybe.
So
I'm not sure the exact verbiage for it, but.
you go through that again?
Is that the income of the rentor?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
it's based on their income, yes.
So, I mean, everyone knows rents are rising in Temple,
Yes.
right? And unfortunately, there are landlords out there that will take the extra money without tending to the property properly. I wonder if maybe one of the reasons why there may not be available properties is because some landlords just don't want to get involved with the government, right? With those constraints, especially with rising rents. So I just, is the maximum median increasing? I mean, is it, I guess,
We do have
my
a
question is,
little bit-
does any of this take into account current market conditions?
It doesn't, but what we do have a bead on are those properties that are charging less than what they could get if they were eligible to receive vouchers. And those are typically the ones that are substandard anyway. So,
If $5,000 doesn't do it and the landlord may not have it.
well, that's true. That's true.
Absolutely.
What I understand from when the program was done before, and I think it was done in the early 90s from what I'm told, they would work with specific banks that would say, okay, we have this grant from the city. Can you, loan us this extra money so we can get there? And then we're going to be able to produce this much more revenue from the property. So there are some things that we can do to help them if they're not able to do it. But it's definitely going to be a process of identifying those landlords that are willing and able and that would stand to see a positive impact on their bottom line to do it.
And a positive impact on the neighborhood.
Correct.
Nancy, you could also share that CCOG also are running their own incentivized program for the same thing, actually paying, I think, up to twice the amount of rent as incentivized to get to the for the same issues that they're having just all over that.
Yeah. Did y'all hear that? SIGCOG is doing some additional programs to help supplement that voucher program to give them to incentivize landlords to take advantage of it.
The landlord can have the money to put more money in. That's not a disqualifier for the landlord.
Just a cap of 5,000 in grant.
Correct.
So what will we?
Wait, excuse me, just 1 second. Say that
Well,
again.
just to reiterate what you were saying, the grant program is $5,000.
Oh, right.
If the landlord wants to spend $8,000 of their own, that'd be a 13,000, only 5 of it would be a grant.
No, I
Right.
understand
That's what you
perfectly.
said.
The landlord can
Right.
put 100,000 in if he so chose.
Right.
Got it. Okay,
Right.
sorry. Thank you.
I was just wondering about the remote registration and what will that involve and how will? What is the purpose? What do we do?
That is a great question, and I don't know the answers. That's Buford's program. But I do know that he's nearing completion on that project, and he'll be able to present something to you all shortly.
I think that will be helpful for the the landlords to be able to know.
And I think that's also, Judy, I think that's a good point, and I was gonna bring that up too, because, often our approaches are multifaceted, and you certainly like to have the opportunity to provide the carrot through some incentives. But if somebody is renting out a substandard structure and we have a rental registration program that's more of the stick element of it, you could, someone could be encouraged to participate in the incentive program if there was also a registration program that helped to get at the code violations.
So the two are sort of married together, excuse me, in some ways.
I think that there's, our challenges in neighborhood revitalization are great, and the more tools we can have in our toolbox, the better. There's not a silver bullet where this is going to solve all of the issues, but the more opportunities we can layer on top of each other, it just helps Nancy and her team find the right program that helps the most amount of people and makes the most progress in our revitalization. So this by no means is the end all be all, but it is an important, we think, component of a bigger housing reinvestment strategy.
For example, in Midtown, there's 70% of that area are rental properties. So, and that's an older area, so it definitely can make a difference.
Just anecdotally, I have a rental that my tenant contacted me, and I believe that Hill Country, is that right? Hill,
The community action,
yes.
they have the weatherization program.
Well, they contacted her. They said that they would pay her rent until the money ran out. I think they had a grant, COVID grant or something. No inspection. I filled out a one-page thing, sent it to them. So I just say that to say that there are competing programs out there, and some landlords, not me because I'm not a slumlord, but some landlords will take the path of least resistance, right? And so I wonder if that might have had something to do with return vouchers and things like that, because I think there are lots of agencies with lots of programs out there now, especially with COVID money. So just something to think about, be aware of.
Definitely.
Nancy, do you have, my understanding from the COG was this is not a new issue, that this has been ongoing. So I'm not sure that the pandemic had as much to do with it, because I think they've struggled for quite some time to be able to use all the vouchers that are available.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my renter said, to that point, my renter said that they told her it was COVID relief funds. And then again, there's lots of programs, lots of money, lots of everything. So, yeah. anything else?
The program.
Thanks, you guys.
Let's make a goal of having no return vouchers. A goal of no return vouchers.
Because it is just money, right? That could be put into the community. It's just sitting there.
Right.
We talk about maximizing, federal dollars or state dollars here in, through grants and things like that. This is basically another grant program.
Sure.
So
It is a grant
from
program.
the Fed, so.
And it would not stop it from being, I guess it would not stop it from being combined, for instance, with your weatherization program, that your tenant, not yours, your tenant, that the two could occur.
No, this what I'm from, in my case, my tenant, it had nothing to do with weatherization.
Oh.
They told her this money is here, use it till it runs out. And I mean, I had to send them a form that I filled out, a copy of the current lease.
I think that was
Done and done.
a grant the county got that they said contracted with.
It's free money to her, and she's very interested in that.
Sure.
So
And I think it will operate separately, because one program is for the tenant specifically, and then the other program is for the landlord. So they could be combined if they have the separation of that, where one program is for the landlords and another.
Good.
There's no further discussion on item 2. We'll move on to item 3, which is to receive a presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2022 business plan, including but not limited to an overview of the proposed fiscal year 2022 annual budget.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is my favorite presentation of the year.
This is our only chance to hear it. Too.
Yes.
It's new and fresh.
David said he was excited to hear it for the first time, but the rest of them, not so much. So I have less slides than John Keela had for reinvestment zone meeting last week, but I don't think I'm gonna meet the I have a dream speech standard. So just forewarning you. Yes, it would be a futile effort, I'm sure.
Is Gloria watching the?
She's not even gonna worry about it. So
She blew it out of the water already.
So this is our third year of presenting our annual budget in the context of a multi-year business plan. As council will recall, we started this approach back in fiscal year 2020. So the fiscal year 2022 business plan is the third round. Last year was obviously a challenging time because when we were presenting the budget and the business plan this time last year, we were very early into the pandemic and really unknown conditions and uncharted territory. So we are excited to present the plan here to you that lets us get a little bit more back on track from where we were last year. So as you'll recall, the business plan has 4 main components. Its foundation is the strategic plan. It has a financial plan element, our annual budget, and our capital plan. So we'll go over each of those elements. Starting with the strategic plan, you will know this slide very well. The strategic plan, it was adopted by you all in 2020, developed through a process where you spent a lot of time and several special work sessions to come up with our vision, our mission, our values, and our focus areas. You'll also recall that a few months ago, we talked about adding a 5th focus area, this communication and collaboration. So you will see that as a formal recommendation from staff as part of the 2022 business plan process. We are along the lines of with the additional focus area. We also have made just a few changes to our goals and are recommending a few changes to our goals and the addition of 1 goal for a total of 10. So goals 1 through 3 are related to the high performing organization focus area. Goals 4 and 5 are related to the communication and collaboration focus area. 6 and 7 are related to places and spaces. 8 and 9 to smart growth. And then finally 10 is related to our public safety focus area. So that's in brief your strategic plan. In your books that you have in front of you, you have a full copy of the draft strategic plan with all of the goals, all of the initiatives, and I hope that you take that opportunity to read that when you have a chance. But we won't go over that in detail. So moving on to the financial plan, just to recall that all of those initiatives, those programs, those projects that are identified in the strategic plan, the financial plan identifies the resources that are necessary to implement those things that are contained in the strategic plan and identifies the revenue sources that can be used in order to accomplish the goals, initiatives that you've set out in the strategic plan. So our business plan is what I call a financially constrained plan. If you see a project or initiative listed in the strategic plan, there are identified resources in the financial plan to implement that particular initiative, program, or project. Again, we lay out our financial plan in coordination with the 5 focus areas. So I want to talk to you about some of the highlights of the initiatives, program, projects, and resources that are in the financial plan. And I'm going to go through them by focus area. So I'll start with places and spaces. And you'll notice a few icons as we go along in the presentation. This one represents, it's something that's been in the plan, but we have an update recommended to this. So this is related to parks and recreation staffing.
We are recommending throughout the term of our financial plan, we're recommending additional maintenance workers for our parks and recreation program so that we're able to continue to maintain high quality parks and recreation facilities. We're also, the update here is we're also recommending 3 part-time positions, recreation leader positions that are part-time to help us at Crossroads as we've opened that wonderful facility over the last year. We have realized that we are it's very popular and we are booking a lot of tournaments and events, and so some additional part-time staff to help make sure that we're programming that facility in a high quality way to match the improvements there are necessary. So that's the update that you see related to that initiative. This one is a new program that we're recommending in a future year of the financial plan to create a park ranger program to help us have presence at our parks. We do have some issues from time to time with graffiti and other forms of vandalism. And we also just feel like having some staff that are dedicated to being in the parks throughout the day and throughout the weekend, being helpful to our citizens and ensuring that all parks rules are followed and our parks are a safe place would be very beneficial to our community. So this is a new program that we're recommending for a future year. We still do have a placeholder in our financial plan for a potential parks bond election. Council will recall that you all did call an election for last May that we unfortunately had to cancel because of the pandemic. So we do have this still in our planning module, but it would be something that I would recommend we look at in a future year, potentially the fall of 2023. But new to our recommendations is a parks replacement capital program that would allow us to fund some projects on an annual basis to be able to maintain and update our existing parks and recreation amenities. So these are all examples of playgrounds or other recreation amenities that ultimately were replaced as part of a bond package. But we really feel like it would be good planning to have an ongoing opportunity to replace existing assets so that when we do, if we do, and when we do have a parks bond election, that's able to be focused on expansion of our parks facilities and trails and new amenities and not routine replacement and maintenance of our existing assets. So we are recommending that program to begin in the upcoming year. We are recommending still our library master plan to begin. That's something that we're recommending for the upcoming fiscal year, which would look at all of the facility, both the physical building and layout, but also the operational aspects of the library. So what kind of programming we have, what opportunities we have to improve our services and meet the needs of our community. So that's a program that we are recommending for the upcoming fiscal year. Also related to library, we do have the recommendation to replace the bookmobile in fiscal year 2023. And there's a couple of current part-time positions that we're recommending be upgraded to full-time positions. One is related to our children's programming, to have one of our part-time staff promote to full-time, and then the second is related to our outreach program, and that would be recommended to be to coincide and help support the new bookmobile and getting the library out into additional places and facilities for people who may not be able to physically visit the library. Also new is a recommended downtown parking management program. As council is very aware, we are in the final stages of designing 2 parking garages for our downtown system. We completed a parking action plan last year that has a lot of recommendations for how we can best manage our downtown parking system. And so with the addition of the parking garage assets, as well as the need to make sure we're maintaining and managing our on-street and parking garage system well, we are recommending a parking manager position be added. In the future, we would see a need for an additional parking enforcement official and additional transform temple agent in a future year to help maintain the parking garages and system in downtown. Our neighborhood planning program, still near and dear to my heart. Very excited about this opportunity. So we're recommending that we stay the course with our neighborhood planning program and continue to complete 4 neighborhood plans or kick off 4 neighborhood plans each year. We have completed several at this point. We still have a few in progress, and you can see there the 4 that would be recommended to be completed in the upcoming fiscal year would be the Garden District, Bird Creek, Temple Heights, and the Silo District. We're also recommending that as part of our neighborhood planning program, process that we add as part of those consulting contracts that we do to help develop the plan, to also be able to develop the overlay standards that are needed to implement any types of development or zoning criteria that are recommended in each of the plans, and that we develop what's called a pattern book for each of our neighborhood planning areas, which would essentially establish some pre-approved, pre-vetted housing design standards that would make it very easy for someone who wanted to invest in the neighborhood to pick one of the pre-approved options and get that permitted quickly, and make sure that the types of housing improvements that are going into our neighborhoods are in compliance with the vision that we set through those neighborhood plans, that they're consistent with the character of the neighborhood. And so we feel like this is a really good opportunity. So going forward, we're recommending that we create these as part of our scope for the neighborhood planning, the individual neighborhood plans, and that we also go back for the plans that we've already created and add this component so that we get caught up there and then keep ourselves caught up in the future. So that's a new recommendation. Nancy's gonna be mad at me about this. I really wish that I could clone Nancy and make fun of her. But since I can't, I am requesting support for a neighborhood navigator position that would work in Nancy's department and help the Love Where You Live neighborhood planning team. As we have many of these plans now adopted, we want to make sure that we keep up with the momentum of continuing to kick off and complete a plan each quarter, but also make sure that we're implementing the recommendations that are coming out of the plan, and that we really feel like an additional position to our neighborhood planning team would be very helpful to that process until I can figure out how to clone Nancy.
Well, you know, Nancy did swipe from Kevin, one of the best smiles at the summit.
Yes, yes.
She's missed at the summit, but.
I heard that. I heard. She's good at stealing.
Sorry, Kev.
It happens to us all the time.
So one of the things I also wanted to highlight for you is that in the CIP program of the business plan, you will notice that we are recommending some specific projects for implementation that are coming out of the neighborhood planning process. So this one is not a new one. This is Avenue D, which would rehabilitate or reconstruct Avenue D as well as alleys in that area. So that one is already under design, and we are recommending construction funding. But I do have several new ones that we are recommending as part of our capital programming. One is an allocation actually for each district, that as we complete the plan, one of the things that comes out of each plan is neighborhood identification. So that can be as simple as unique street sign toppers or monumentation signs or something unique that helps us delineate and identify the neighborhood. So we feel like this is a great first step in each neighborhood as we complete that plan to begin the neighborhood identification process. So that is recommended actually for all 18 of our neighborhood planning districts. And then we've tried to identify 1 or 2 projects from each plan that we would consider to get started on over the next few years. This project is from Midtown. If you'll remember, this is the park project that was recommended for Jackson Park in Midtown. So we're recommending this project to be included in our capital plan. This is actually 3rd Street, so it's referenced in 3 different plans, actually. Bel Air, the Historic District Plan, as well as Central. And so this is about installing sidewalks on 3rd Street and really helping activate that important corridor. So this project touches on all 3 of those planning areas. This is a project out of the Bel Air neighborhood. This is for 1st Street pedestrian and bicycle improvements, one of the high priority projects that is recommended from the Bel Air plan. This is out of Ferguson Park. This is the Avenue E area development project that we feel like would be a great project to get started and introduce some infill, kind of greenfield housing into Ferguson Park. This is also out of the Ferguson Park neighborhood plan, and it's the sidewalk trail connections along 14th Street to Central Avenue, from Central to H. This is out of Crestview. We're recommending that we complete both the Knob Creek Trail as well as the 14th Street connector to Ferguson Park. So if you can kind of see that this yellow line along this map, that would be the extent of the trail connection. And that would help us obviously go along with the Henderson Street project that's under design as of now, but also help connect Crestview into the Ferguson Park neighborhood. And then out of the Central District Plan, we are recommending that we get started with the rail line linear park project that was recommended in that plan. If you'll recall, this was also recommended in the historic, a continuation of this. This corridor is recommended in the historic district, so we think this is a great place to start and would see us moving into the historic district after that. So those are the neighborhood planning projects that we're recommending in our capital plan based on the plans we've completed so far. We're also recommending that we continue funding our housing reinvestment strategy. We've talked a little bit about this today already with one of the programs as part of that overall strategy. Nancy and I were just visiting before the council workshop began, and we do have several qualified applicants for our our home rebuild program. So that's another example element of this strategy. We, as council will recall, we recommend that we leverage CDBG and state TDHCA funds to help bring those federal and state grant funds into our community and make sure that we're using those in a strategic way that helps us reinvest in housing in our neighborhoods and make sure that we continue to maintain housing that's affordable for all of our community. So that's places and spaces. Heading into communication and collaboration. Again, this is the recommended new focus area. And I just want to take you back for a second and just kind of looking at that picture. That was one of our first retreats that we held together as a team when we were developing the strategic plan. And one of the areas that was identified as one of our both weaknesses and areas for opportunity for improvement was our communication. And so one of the reasons that we're recommending calling this out as its standalone focus areas, because we, at the staff level, we just really feel like that was very important to council as we look back at what our goals were around that, and that at this point, we really feel like it deserves its own focus area. Right now, it's the action items that are related to our communication programming and our engagement programming are falling under high performing organization. And we just really feel like it's more about the community and the connection with the community, and that a focus area that really calls that out is important. So I want to take you further back and ask if you remember this picture. So at one point, this was about the best you could find if you Google Temple, Texas, a blurry picture of an entry sign that no longer existed. And that was true. That was something that we were hearing at the city. We were hearing it at the Economic Development Corporation. And it was a problem because this was the image that we were sending out into the community and the state and the nation, the world, really. So you all supported, a few years ago, supported the creation of a marketing and communication department within the city, really kicking off from the plan that we developed in collaboration with the Economic Development Corporation to study Temple as a place and how we were communicating and marketing ourselves. So you'll remember we had a lot going on, and the recommendation was really to bring that into a centralized department for the organization to make sure that we are consistent with what we're doing and that we add additional resources there so that we can enhance the way that we communicate with our citizens and tell our story of the really, really amazing things that are going on in our community. So fast forward to today, and you all have seen a lot of this information. I think that our team has done a fantastic job in both updating what we look like on the web, the ways that we interact with our citizens, the ways that citizens can interact with us. We've got apps and all sorts of opportunities that didn't exist just a couple of years ago. So I think with the resources that you all have supported, Heather and her team have done just a really fantastic job. So throughout the financial plan, you'll see additional resources recommended to keep incrementally enhancing the way that we communicate and collaborate with our community. One of the FY 2022 recommendations is an additional graphic design specialist position. We have one. We keep her incredibly busy, and we really feel like we can benefit from a second graphic design specialist to continue to create this level of content and this level of imagery for our community. Serve Temple, our Serve Temple Board and Commission program is also falling under our communication and collaboration focus area. There's not really a direct resource per se that I'm calling out here. I just wanted you to kind of, as you consider this fifth focus area, kind of understand the different parts of our programming that would fall under that focus area. Our new DEI program would also fall under this area in many ways. There are some elements that would continue to fall under the organization as their internal efforts to the city as an organization. A new program that we are recommending, our new position that I am recommending, is a government relations manager. This is in a future year. This is not for next year. But I do feel like our organization would benefit from someone who's dedicated to building strong relationships across all levels of government, including our state legislative process, but also our county, our school districts, our other community partners, just really having someone that is able to really build upon those relationships and encourage the communication and the collaboration there. Just as a reminder, at the state level, these are from the past legislative session. I haven't received updated numbers, but in 2019 legislative session, there were over 7,500 bills introduced. Of those, over 2,000 were somehow related to cities and what we do and what we can do or can't do. That's a lot of things that are coming at us in a short period of time to make sure that we're communicating on understanding how that would impact us and communicating that effectively. We do have, through your adopted legislative priorities, we do have local decision-making as one of our priorities. We believe that protecting Temple residents' right to govern themselves and work with their city government to adopt and enforce ordinances, programs, and projects that address citizen priorities or respond to local citizen concerns is important. You've seen this slide before. What works in Temple and what Temple needs to be successful is not the same thing that Tuscaloosa or Tuscola does, or Texline or Texarkana. We're all different. Texas is too big of a state for a one-size-fits-all approach. And unfortunately, we don't have, many of the members at the state level are not collaborative with cities and counties. And so we do have to take a lot of time and energy to maintain those relationships and make sure that that we protect the city's interests. You know, y'all have all heard me talk about it throughout this past legislative session, but things like, you know, not being able to hire professional legislative consultants or lobbyist firms, not being able to issue debt for mobility related projects. Like, there's a lot of things that happen at the state level. And so this, I think, is an important program for us to consider.
Brenda, all of those things fell under this new position that may come about.
Yes.
And what fiscal year do you have that in mind for?
It's in the plan for fiscal year 2025.
Okay.
If there's a possibility to have it in place before the next legislative session, that would really be my recommendation. But conservatively, I think we can have it by 25 and maybe sooner.
Is that a position other cities have, or is it pretty common?
It's definitely very common the larger community you are.
Makes sense.
But it sometimes falls to like an assistant to the city manager type position, or a standalone position like that, or sometimes to like a public information officer type role. So cities do it differently, but it is not uncommon to have a standalone position.
And that person would be in communication and collaboration?
They would be in the city
Where
manager's office,
yeah, okay.
but the goals related to that program would be under the focus area of communication and collaboration.
That person would report to who?
Me, or the city manager.
Yep.
In 2025.
And that, I'm assuming that person, under lists of qualifications when we go about hiring, or you go about hiring, would be local knowledge. I mean, I'm thinking that we don't want to train somebody coming in about who's who and who's connected to who and whom and
Yeah.
why.
It's that would certainly be an asset for someone to have local knowledge. Understanding the state legislative process would also be important. So
Very.
you would just have to look at who you had interested,
Sure.
and decide at that point what qualities or qualifications or skills or background or talent you most value based on the pool that you had at the time. But yes, I think either already having those relationships or having the right personality to effectively and quickly form those relationships would be an important consideration in hiring that position.
Good idea.
So moving on to smart growth. First of all, if you were wondering if we're growing, if you just contemplated that at all, the answer is yes, we are. In last year, and keep in mind, we were in pandemic mode for most of that year. We had almost 1,200 housing starts, which represented a 23% increase from the past year. And if you looked back a couple of years, it was a 78% increase. So, but I would say we felt like we were growing pretty well in 2017. Well, we as of last year, we were up 78%. And if you look at year to date, we're up from 2020 by another 18% right now. So we are growing. One of the things that you'll very much recall that we completed last year was an update to our comprehensive plan. So we have a couple of recommendations related to resource allocations to help us make sure that we're implementing that plan. One of the big projects that is high on the list for effectively using the comprehensive plan is an update to our Unified Development Code. That's a big project that will require a lot of collaboration with our development community. And so we're recommending both a senior planner position to at the staff level to be the champion of the comprehensive plan and its implementation, as well as some professional services funding specifically related to helping us get through that UDC process and make sure that what's contained in the comprehensive plan is able to be done and our regulations align with our goals and where we're wanting to grow and develop as a community.
That's this fiscal year?
for 2022, yes.
2022.
And overall, in planning and development services, we're also recommending some additional positions. Nothing new from our past plans. You'll have a recommendation for a combination building inspector position in 2022, an additional one in a future year, so a planning manager position and some additional permit technicians in future years, as well as an additional planner in a future year. So this year, in 2022, we're recommending a combination building inspector and the senior planner to focus on the comprehensive plan. Also, as part of our development services team, we're, again, this is not new, but just as a reminder, the business plan contains a business navigator position that will help small and mid-size or startup businesses navigate our development process and really seek to jumpstart them into thriving in our community.
Can we talk about that for just a second?
Sure.
So tell me, with the lack of a business navigator now, what are the complaints? That's all, I mean, I remember those from past presentations, kind of old info. Maybe it's still relevant information. I've seen it before. What sort of complaints are we getting out there, and where's it coming from? Is it coming from the chamber? Is it coming from, I mean, where are these types of complaints coming from that it's now to the point that there's so much coming here that we need someone to help navigate? Or would it be maybe more productive to make the system not so difficult to navigate?
Well, so I wouldn't classify it necessarily as complaints. Certainly this business navigator proposal came out of the DCI project, which you see the quotes that we received there from some of the people that our consulting team met with there. We have I really am proud to say that we have a very efficient and hopefully Marty will be over in the corner backing me up. We are business friendly and we work.
And I agree with that.
When you are not at all familiar with the development process, though, you have a dream, you want to open a business, and you don't know anything about getting a building permit, getting any part of what's required. It's just it can be very daunting. So it's not so much that we have complaints or that we aren't doing well in our development process. It's just that if you really want to kind of be a place for small businesses to start and grow, then having someone who's very familiar with and has the time, right? So that they're not just managing a whole bunch of cases of people who do the development process. That's what they do for a living and they're familiar with it. So just the volume that they're dealing with. But you've got someone who can be very dedicated to that small business owner or who has an idea or has, a desire and really be very step by step with them in a way that a professional developer just does not need.
So define then developer. Because whenever I think of development and developer, I think of one thing, and that's typically not what this incoming person is going to. I mean, I would think that someone that's trying to open a small business is not going out and building a new building they're going to rent from a landlord. They're going to do something. Or am I missing the definition of development?
They may lease the space, but that space may need build out, or they may decide. I'm thinking of, there are business owners who come in and build a strip center and use part of it for their own business and lease out the rest of it. So I don't want to pick on anybody because I'm struggling to see if you just look at downtown, for example, and any person, like we have restaurant owners or breweries that are interested in, they've got the idea of investing, but they've never built anything. They've never gone through a renovation project or even the process to get, what grease trap do you need? What kind of zoning do you need? What are the steps to get me from where I want to be from where I am to where I want to be. So,
I think Bryn, maybe a good example of some of the CIS grants
mhm.
or CIS applicants that had struggles there.
Is that not something that a general contractor would
What,
walk them through?
what we've seen recently in some of our CIS grant applications, we've seen instances where you have a general contractor and what they're doing, they're bringing a plan to us and they tell us as much as they think we need to know, but maybe not everything that we need to know. And we get late into the project and we find out that, well, you didn't tell me there was an apartment above this use, so now you need a fire suppression system in your restaurant rather than just previously you didn't need that fire suppression system. Maybe you just need a vent hood. And if we had this position to be able to, in some cases, handhold folks as they come to the city and they say, hey, I've always wanted to do this. And we can say, okay, well, the building you're looking at, have you considered if there's any other uses in the building? Are there, residences above your building? Are there other types of stores that are contained in the same building? Because all of those things tie together. And a lot of times a general contractor's mind is set on, what do I need to do to get a permit, which is what they were hired for, or what do I need to do to get this job done? And not looking beyond that to what are the hiccups that we could run into along the way.
Well, the general contractor's not paid to look at the hiccups, so he's paid,
Right.
he or she is paid to do whatever the scope of the bid is for that job.
And this position helps in some ways to bridge a gap between a lot of folks that are getting started and they're trying to do this, they're sinking their life savings into it maybe. And they don't know if they need an architect. They don't know if they need to hire an engineer. And if you go to an engineer, a lot of times an engineer is going to tell you, yeah, you need an engineer. Because that's their livelihood. But for them to have someone to help guide them through that process of, yes, you absolutely have to have these design professionals and you need this type of a contractor. It's an ear to get them where they want to be.
If I might add, in my own experience and just working with the Downtown Vitality Committee, my personal experience, I had to reach out to Bryn to say, hey, these are some of the ordinances that the city have in place. How do we navigate these waters? With her duties and all her other responsibilities, I think a business navigator would probably be a great extension because I'm not the only one that has certain issues. Kind of like the issue with the Chapter 14 ordinance with the food trucks. I mean, the business navigator would have been someone who could have been already kind of preemptively working with them, getting that information and knowing, okay, this is how this is going to affect them. I think that one of the things that I have seen is that you have a gap in communication sometimes. Sometimes this department or this board or organization isn't aware. And then this may be something that affects stakeholders in our community or even new coming stakeholders. The business navigator would be able to be someone who's aware of what's going on, they're aware of all that, and they know how to say, okay, well, Deontay, if you want to create this business in Temple on this side or in this area, in this area part, here's what you need to know. Here's going to be the rules and regulations. And I think right now, we really don't have anyone that specifically specializes in working with new started business. Also, just giving an idea about new starting and entrepreneurs. Usually, most entrepreneurs, they don't have the resources. They don't have the ability to fully fund their projects. I think with having a business navigator in our city, working in part with an entrepreneur incubator, then this is something to where they can streamline that process and we can get new businesses. I've talked to plenty of developers who don't want to touch certain projects because they're just like, well, you have to have a little bit more entrepreneurs coming in. We need some more small business ideas, not just the big already established companies expanding, but we need to have new ideas that can grow, that can expand, and that can scale. And then I think this is what, I guess from my understanding, is what I would look at the business navigator being a part of and helping that process develop.
Go ahead.
In my previous life before Tava, I ran an organization in Killeen called the Business Resource Center. Worked for the Chamber of Commerce. It was a joint venture between Central Texas College and Workforce and the Chamber of Commerce. Bryn's description is exactly what we did. There were two of us in the office and computers available for small business, but we basically, folks walk in the door and I want to open a restaurant. They have no clue about grease traps, or they have no clue about the health department. And we help guide them through that, writing business plans, getting LLCs, how to navigate, do all that kind of stuff. And, you know, that was basically it. But probably every third person that came through the door wanted to know how to open a food truck. Just as an example, but yeah, it's a very valuable resource to have. And so whether to have it in the
And how was
community,
that funded?
it was a 1/3 funding between the Clean Chamber of Commerce and Central Texas College and Texas Workforce.
Moving on. So we do continue to have funding for the Temple Economic Development Corporation as they serve as our industrial marketing arm as well as incentive negotiation partner. So the financial plan recommends continued funding of that organization. So as of today, or as of the end of last quarter, I guess, we have $348 million in active capital improvement projects. Whether those be utility, reinvestment zone, mobility, parks, or drainage facility and equipment, we've got something going on in every area of our community. The future outlook, so the remaining years of our financial plan include an additional a little bit over $400 million in additional capital programs. So again, those cover areas including utilities, mobility, parks, RZ, and drainage facilities, public safety, and equipment. So we are busy with capital work, both supporting and growing community, as well as making sure that we're reinvesting in the infrastructure, in our existing infrastructure, in our existing neighborhoods. We do have some resources recommended in future years in our engineering department to help bring on an additional project manager, project engineer position as our capital program continues to grow, but that's a future year. We do have a robust mobility capital improvement program that is underway and has been working really well for several years. As council will recall, we're also actively underway with our mobility master plan, which will help guide the future investments in our mobility and transportation related capital improvement programming in the future. So we have a placeholder built into the financial plan for projects that come out of that mobility master planning process. So we're actively working on our current projects and actively planning for what is next. So one thing I wanted to touch on today is our street, our pavement maintenance, our street maintenance program. So this past year, we conducted a pavement maintenance assessment. So we looked at every mile of our street infrastructure, and we graded the pavement. And so you can see this is just like your typical grading structure for a pavement assessment. You have at the top level essentially a brand new street that is really doesn't require any maintenance. Your next level is a street that's is in good condition, but is a candidate for some preventative maintenance. So for example, micro surfacing, slurry seal, or crack sealing. And then you get down into the next level, which is a street that's in fair condition, could still be a candidate for some preventative type maintenance, but is tipping to the point where some major maintenance would be required to rehabilitate that surface. Then you have a level where the maintenance or the pavement is in poor condition, and really preventative maintenance options are no longer on the table. You would need to consider resurfacing or mill and resurface. And by resurface, you can read that overlay. So our overlay program. And then at the very bottom of the chart, you have a road that's in such poor condition that really your only option is to do a complete reconstruction, rebuild, or a full depth reclamation of that roadway. So in your Kegley, yes, Kegley is in the red zone, yes, for sure. So in your ideal pavement management program, you will be investing in preventative maintenance so that you keep your road surfaces from getting into the poor or very poor condition. Preventative maintenance, routine preventative maintenance is a cost-effective approach that extends the life of your assets without requiring major investment in that maintenance, or unfortunately getting into the position of requiring a full reconstruction. So our pavement right now looks like this. Our arterials are in we have almost 72 miles of arterials. The weighted average grade for our arterials is 79. Our collectors are in a little bit lower rated condition with an average of 70. And then our local streets, which obviously make up the vast majority of our lane miles, those are at weighted average 75. So that's good news. That's not something that's bad. I'm not bringing you bad news. But as council will recall, over the last almost 10 years that we've been actively investing in our transportation capital improvement program, one of the major parts of that program was our overlay, or what was originally called the Legacy Pavement Preservation Program. So that allowed us, or that portion of funding, which came from bond proceeds, allowed us to do overlays of many, many miles of streets throughout our community. And so that's, I think we can look at these numbers and say we were successful in doing rehabilitations throughout the community. That doesn't mean that we're all the way done, and that there's still not additional needs for major rehabilitations or major mill and overlay programs. But what it does mean is that we really need to have a shift between the focus that we've had over the last 10 years related to mill and overlay, which is bond funded, to more preventative maintenance. So those things that aren't as expensive, but they are not appropriate for bond funding. They're appropriate for operating funding, and really need to invest in making sure our operating budget for pavement preservation is at a level that will allow us to maintain these street conditions so that we don't fall back into a place where we're going to have to come back in with bond funded overlays. So I want to show you a little bit, a video here that gives an example of a So one of the new items that is recommended in the financial plan is the establishment of a more robust pavement management program as part of our operating budget. So again, we've made great investments in overlays that are part of our capital budgeting, but we really need to shift, and we're not done with that yet. There's still, we still have dollars program for overlays in our capital programming side. But if we do not focus on our operating side and some of the preventative maintenance, we're not going to be able to maintain the improvements that we've seen from the investments we've made over the past decade. So based on the pavement assessment study, it is my recommendation that we get to a place where we have $1,750,000 a year for operating preventative pavement maintenance, something like a slurry seal program or a chip seal or something like this, where it's extending the life of the pavement by 5 to 7 years, and it's appropriate to be funded through the operating budget. Obviously, that's a big number to swallow in 1 year. So my approach that I'm recommending is that we step that in over the course of the financial plan period, and that we start with an investment of $250,000, and then we build on that each year until we achieve the recommended annual budget to continue to maintain our streets in that good condition that we've been able to achieve.
So in fiscal year 2022, spending $250,000, what are we doing with that $250,000?
You would be, so I should say that we do have some preventative maintenance money in our budget. It's around $200,000. So you would be added, that would be additive. And it would be most likely a contract services. So we wouldn't have an in-house crew do slurry seal.
I'm not buying a truck.
Right. It's going to be recommended to be contract services. We do have an in-house crack sealing team. So some of that money could go towards some materials for enhanced crack sealing efforts. But my guess is that our transportation team will prioritize the roads that would benefit the most, and we just get started.
Then at what point in this 6-year, 7-year plan are you actually buying a truck, putting a crew together? And
It's we would recommend always contracting the
okay,
slurry seal.
I got you.
Just like we do overlays. And
Okay.
if you noticed in that video,
Just put in operations versus bond.
right, it's
Okay.
not appropriate for bond funding, but we don't, I'm not recommending a crew.
Crew,
It's a contracted service, but
I got
yeah. But I am recommending some crews, but these
Not
aren't
for
new. Yeah, these aren't new. So there are 4 mobility or transportation related maintenance crews proposed throughout the financial plan. Council will recall that we've got an alley and right of way crew. We've got a sign crew. We have a concrete maintenance crew, and we have an additional patch crew. So 4 additional crews throughout the financial plan.
Bryn,
Yes, ma'am.
could you go back there? Okay, so in fiscal year 20, the first one, we're at $250,000.
Uh-huh,
The second year, we're 500, $500,000.
uh-huh,
Each year, we're building on it.
yes.
Okay, what happens in 2029?
We maintain at 1.7.
Okay.
So it will be going forward, but it's built into your base budget, so it's not, it should be a sustainable approach for us.
Okay, so 2029 and 2030, theoretically, we stay at 1.7 million or 2 million each year thereafter.
Yes, and
I got
at
it.
some point, you'll need to revisit the money just based on cost as well
Sure.
as lane miles
Inflation, et cetera.
as the city grows. But I think that this plan, while it's gonna take a few years to get there, will help us be able to really do a good job of maintaining our streets.
Thank you.
The first few years, it won't be, the money won't go very far, but as we build up into it, we'll be able to really do a good preventative maintenance program, in my opinion.
So whenever you say that this has been funded via bond revenue, are we still doing contracts but using bond money instead of?
Because the overlay is, again, that takes your street back to a 20-year life. So you can make a case for
Yeah.
financing that in that way. These types of programs only add 5 to 7 years to the life, so it wouldn't be appropriate to fund it through a bond program.
The average life of most bonds are about 12 years too.
Yeah.
And if you look there, in 3 years, cumulatively, you've spent 1.5 million in just 3 years.
So if a new construction is, road is supposed to last 20 to 25 years,
15 to 20.
15 to 20 years, and you do a project like this that gives it another 5 to 7, can you only do sort of this revitalization process once? And
No,
then maybe the base is broken down?
I think you can do it 2 to 3 times before you need to consider an overlay.
It depends on how long, because every time you add something, it gets a little bit thicker, right? And eventually you get thick enough where you start to fill your street up and there's, asphalt from curb to curb, nothing but rock. So eventually you do have to come in and pull some of that back out and reset. But
So with a program like this, you could almost double the life of the road.
yes.
Oh, absolutely. And it's far more cost effective to maintain what you have and not let it get into it. Not that you again, I think it's clear, but you can't stop doing overlays. You'll still need to do them. But the strategy of letting your road fall to the level where the only option is an overlay is a far more expensive proposition than maintaining it as you go.
$1 spent in this state, so in your good, fair and good condition years is worth about $4 to $5 in your latter years.
Wow.
So it'll cost you 4 to 5 times as much to do the overlay down the road as it would if you spend this money in your early years and just extend the life.
That's interesting.
You let it get to the point where cracks are allowing a lot of moisture to get down to those lower layers that you just mentioned, then you've allowed the degradation that you can't undo with surface treatments.
Got it.
Think where we'd be had we done that on Cagley
I told them
20 years ago.
to.
You what?
I told them to. They did.
Oh,
We'd be in the same place and just look at them.
we couldn't be in the same place.
So for our utility CIP program, you can see that we continue to maintain an aggressive capital program for our water and wastewater needs. That total number there, 168.3, came down a little bit from the last time or from last year, but that's primarily because one of our very big projects, the water treatment plant, has kicked off. So it's in the 2021 number, and it's no longer in the future category. But those numbers do contain major plant expansions at both Temple Belton wastewater treatment plant as well as Dozier Farm. So those are big cost items that we're planning for as part of our financial plan. We also have, as council is well aware, a continued commitment on our sewer overflow reduction program, which involves some large capital projects, such as the Bird Creek Interceptor project, which final phase will be completed in 2022, but also other major trunk lines, such as the Knob Creek wastewater trunk line. And then in a future year, you also have Williamson Creek that will need to be upgraded as well. And then, as you will recall, we're doing a comprehensive evaluation of our sanitary sewer system by taking a drainage basin by basin approach. So the financial plan continues to maintain that commitment to both doing the evaluations and also beginning to implement the projects that come out of that. So again, that's taking a look at all of the lateral lines that are feeding into those major trunk systems and identifying the projects, both the capital work as well as the operation and maintenance work that needs to be performed in order to maintain a effective wastewater collection system. We do have several crews proposed for our utility maintenance, both our water distribution system as well as our wastewater collection system. In 2022, we recommend bringing on an additional wastewater maintenance crew. We've got an additional maintenance crew in a future year, as well as 3 additional water maintenance crews in future years. So this just continues our progression to adding the resources we need to maintain our water and wastewater infrastructure. Solid waste, you all received a presentation, and then recently, I guess at your last meeting, you adopted the new solid waste management plan. So our financial plan now programs out dollars for the routes and the resources that are recommended as part of that plan. In fiscal year 2022, we're recommending 3 routes, 3 new routes: a residential garbage route, a residential recycling route, and a front load commercial route. In 2023, the financial plan slates an additional roll-off route as well as an additional bulk and brush route. In 2024, 2 swing drivers, so drivers that aren't assigned a permanent route but make up for someone's sick time or vacation time or holiday time to make sure that there's always someone manning a route. And as we add routes, we need to add swing drivers so that we maintain the appropriate level of ratio of swing drivers to regular routes. In 2025, we're recommending an additional front load route. In 2026, another additional residential recycling and a residential garbage route. In 27, a roll-off and a brush and bulk route. And then in 28, a front load route as well as an additional swing driver. So that's the kind of solid waste route outlook that is presented in the financial plan. Okay, so moving into public safety. So we have, we've got several changes that we're recommending in our police department budget and financial plan. This is Chief Reynolds' first budget year with us, so I really challenged him to look at what was planned and what he has been tasked with and what direction that we're wanting to take the department, and to let me know what his ideal plan would look like. And so we do have some changes that I want to talk about here. First, council will remember, I believe that we do have a priority to increase the number of officers that we have on within our department, which will allow us to increase our patrol, our presence in the community, our visibility in the community, our ability for our officers to have time that they're not, that they're able to initiate contact with our community and are not just going from one 911 call to another. So this still remains a priority, which will involve going from 8 patrol districts to 10. But then the change here, the added thing is that we're also looking to go to 10-hour shifts. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So up until, well, actually, still currently, we are on 12-hour shifts. So we essentially have a department that operates where there's really no overlap between the different shifts. You've got one that comes on at 6 in the morning and one that comes off at that time as well. So this presents several challenges. It presents a challenge in that there's no training time. There's no time that we can really effectively train our officers without reducing the police patrol presence in our community. It also presents a challenge that a 12-hour shift easily turns into 13, 14, and 15-hour days. And if you try to work that level of time and be in this type of job that requires you to be, at your best at all moments, that's just really challenging to do that consistently. And then the other another problem with this is that you can create almost a sense of 4 separate departments because you never have a team overlapping and working together. You've got, again, you kind of just pass in the halls, but you don't have the collaboration and the overlap time. Because of our staffing challenges in our police department, Chief is moving to 8-hour shifts in the next few weeks. So this does allow for obviously shorter work days and does allow for some training time because of overlapping days. But it's still not an optimal schedule because you still don't have that time where where you've got more than one shift or more than one team working at the same time. So ultimately, and the schedule that we are wanting to work to is a 10-hour shift, which would allow a day, evening, and night team to overlap hours. It gives a structure where officers work 4 days, 4 days a week, and have time for training, have time for team collaboration, and have a more realistic time frame. That again, that 12-hour shift that so easily creeps to 13 or 14 is just not sustainable. So for this program to both move to 10-hour shifts as well as 10 patrol districts, we need a total of 15, or the financial plan includes a total of 15 additional police officer positions as well as 4 sergeant positions. And so this is an update from what we had previously presented.
So that's 19 total new positions.
Yes, ma'am. But wait, there's more.
Oh, good.
We still want to maintain our focus on neighborhood and district community policing. One of the things that I love about Chief Reynolds is that he has a heart for community policing. It's important to him. He believes in it. And he will tell you, and I agree with him, that community policing is the job of every officer in the department. It's not just the job of a special unit or a cops unit. But we did talk a lot about the value that a specific community policing program or community policing unit can add to our department in conjunction with the expanded patrol operations that we just talked about, that will give us the resources for every officer to be able to engage in their areas with their community and build those ongoing, authentic relationships that are so foundational and important to an effective police department, and that trust that's necessary within the community. So this, we did, council, you'll recall, we did get a grant for 3 officers in our 2021 budget. And so this would build out the remaining officers and sergeant that's needed for that program. We're also recommending some additional civilian community service technicians who serve as our non-emergency call takers, as well as our records technicians. This was previously in the plan, but we have increased our recommended 2 to recommended 3 over the course of the financial plan. And one of these positions is recommended to be funded in 2022. We are still recommending an additional property crimes CID unit or detective unit to be able to maintain the service levels to our community as we grow. This is new, a couple of additional officers that are dedicated to our training efforts. I think this is really important for us, that we have a very robust and effective training program for our officers, so that we're equipping them with the tools and skills that they need to be the very best at what they do, and to keep our community safe and keep themselves safe as well. This is also new, adding a couple of additional civilian crime scene technicians to the department. We do have 2 crime scene technician positions, and as our community grows, we see the need in a future year to add additional resources to that unit. The Violent Crime Enforcement Squad, the last phase of staffing for that unit is still recommended in the financial plan. So that's a total, if you were keeping track, that's a total of 40 positions over the course of the financial plan year. So again, the first priority of Chief and the first priority of that I'm presenting to you is to get started on getting us to our 10 districts and 10-hour shifts by adding 5 police officer positions in 2022, as well as a customer service technician position. Then 5 additional officers in 23 and 24, as well as 2 sergeants each of those years for that same initiative. and community-oriented policing and CID and training and crime scene priority would begin in 25 and complete in 26, and then moving into 27, 28, our violent crime enforcement squad program.
Of course, the big question is always availability of officers.
We're going to talk about that too.
I know we approved an item last meeting for recruitment. When does that process kick in, or has it already since it's been approved?
We started it today. We actually started it the very next day. We have the company, a brainstorming session with the company.
Okay, good.
And they had boots on the ground here today to do scouting locations for us.
What company?
Epic.
Consulting company.
Consulting.
Good.
Can we spend 2 minutes talking about that process of kind of what they're going to do for just a better understanding?
Sure. They're going to spend time really kind of getting to know us as an agency and a department, where we are from branding and marketing, which they're plugged into the process as well. And we're going to spend time filming various videos at different locations. And really the recruiting video should be almost experiential. So that's what we're trying to get out of it. It doesn't highlight just the police department. It highlights the city of Temple and what is the draw? What would make an employee desire to leave wherever they are and come to Temple? And there are plenty of reasons for folks to come to Temple. So that'll be part of the essence of it as well as highlighting the various units, both sworn and non-sworn within the police department, various short vignettes, as well as longer videos that kind of highlight that. They're going to help us, with other things like a recruiting table. Perhaps they'll work with marketing and communications on designing that. From that comes an entirely dedicated website to our recruiting efforts, which will be very helpful. Having a dedicated space towards recruiting quality, character-driven individuals, be law enforcement officers within the city of Temple. That'll link back to Dayforce and all the other recruiting sites that we have, as well as they'll do other things, social media, direct marketing campaigns throughout the nation.
Very good, thank you.
Chief, is any of the content that they're going to generate that's not PD specific, is Heather's group going to have proprietary rights where they can use some of that footage and piecing together recruitment video,
I believe we own it all.
Okay.
We do have funding for a talent acquisition or a talent strategy for our general government. That process is going through a request for proposal right now to find a consultant that is well matched to help us with our staffing challenges in our parks and public works department. So we didn't forget about you, Don. We got you. So our public safety bond is still something that we're recommending pursuing. We do have a few updates to this program as well. I just wanted to remind you of what our current training facility for our police department looks like. Really
Oh,
quickly.
God, it's so horrible. We don't want to see
You don't want to see it,
No.
okay.
It's
So
embarrassing.
this program would allow us to build a new, to expand our current fire training center into a true public safety training facility. We would add a shooting range as well as a simunition shoot house, classroom space, which is the new element that we haven't talked about before. Build out additional training props in our fire department, so different training scenarios that would finish out that facility. A driving track for driving safety for really all of our departments. It also includes the expansion of our animal shelter by adding additional kennel space, conditioning the space that we have, and expanding our adoption center area. So we're still recommending that we move forward with that program. We continue to recommend a couple of squad units as well as staffing of those units in our areas of growth that are on the edges of our community. So again, your traditional response company at a station would be in an engine, which is the larger vehicle on the left. You would typically have a 3-person crew on that, a captain, a driver, and a firefighter, and they will respond to both EMS calls as well as fire calls. The squad is the smaller vehicle on the right-hand side of the screen. So we would recommend these be stationed at Station 7 in West Temple, and I believe it's Station 4 on Waters Dairy in South Temple, that would allow us to have dual response capacity out of those stations. The reason that we're focusing on those stations is because they're on the outer areas of our community. So if that engine company is on a call and they're occupied, then getting another unit to come from a more centrally located area takes a longer time. So having dual response capacity at those outlying stations is recommended, and that is still something that we've included in the financial plan. We're also continuing to recommend a 2 fire response district system in a future year, where we would have a battalion chief managing the west side of the community and a battalion chief managing the east side of the community, split most likely by I-35. As you get to a point where you get more than, really it's kind of that 8 stations is kind of the tipping point for span of control and what one chief can handle or is recommended to handle. So we are looking at splitting that as our community grows and making sure we've got the command staff to handle multiple major incidents that could occur in a community our size that's growing at a time.
Is this split, was that split like a population or call-based split, or it's just kind of with the natural geographics?
It's not a finalized area, but it's primarily the travel time and how I-35 impacts the response of the unit. So generally a station that's on the west side of I-35 has a west side response district, and the same is true of east side. So as we get closer to that, we'll do a more specific look at what the right boundaries are. We are recommending 3 additional outdoor warning sirens throughout the course of the financial plan, with one of those being in 2022 and the other 2 in the future years. We do have several replacement fire engines and trucks that are recommended as part of the financial plan. We do have a ladder truck. We're actually recommending that we replace a fire engine with a ladder truck in fiscal year 2022, so that we'll have 3 total ladder trucks, one that are able to cover our total geography. And then we have several fire engines that are scheduled for replacement throughout the 8-year or the 7-year financial plan, as well as some squads, not the ones we talked about that are new, but some that we already have in our fleet that are scheduled for replacement as well. This is new. As you are aware, we're underway with our fire master plan right now, and in anticipation that plan is likely to recommend an additional station within the next several years. We do have a placeholder in the later part of the financial plan for the operational, the staffing needs that would come out of needing a new station. So this is just a placeholder at this time until we get through the fire master plan process and understand if and where and when we might consider a new fire station. We do continue to have additional animal service field officers and animal shelter staff in the plan. We have added some additional positions as recommended in future years to continue to provide services to our growing community. And then we also have additional code compliance resources recommended, including a code compliance manager position in fiscal year 2 and some additional code compliance officers in future years. And then our last category, our last focus area is high performing organization. We are still pursuing accreditation for all 4 of our largest departments, as well as an overall implementation of the Baldrige National Quality Framework for our organization to ensure that we're using best practices and we're being efficient and effective and good stewards of public funds that are entrusted to us. We are continuing to pursue our customer service excellence program, which will help us train and equip and develop our frontline staff to make sure that we are meeting our mission of providing exceptional service without exception. We do have funding in our financial plan for potential customer service staffing for our airport, a couple of dedicated customer service positions. We continue our major investment in technology. We've done a lot of major upgrades in the last couple of years, and we still have a couple of major upgrades to go. A big focus in fiscal year 22 will be in cybersecurity, as we're recommending some additional resources to mitigate and respond to cybersecurity threats, as well as in new records management system for our police department and new software program for our Parks and Recreation department and a new document management system as well. We continue our investment in our facilities through both additional maintenance staff for helping to maintain our facilities, as well as improvements. So things like roof replacements and elevator rehabs and HVAC upgrades are all planned as part of maintaining our facilities. Likewise, our capital equipment, we have significant investment plan for keeping our equipment in good condition. We have additional heavy-duty technician recommended in 2022, as well as a light-duty technician in the future year, a new fleet operations manager to help our team keep up with the assets that we're adding as part of serving our community and meeting the growth that we're experiencing. We also continue to reinvest in routine replacement of our capital equipment so that we're continuing to maintain our ability to serve our community. We are very proud, and we should be very proud of Tracy and her team and the work that they do in maintaining our fiscal soundness. So everything that we do has got to start with the foundation of financial stability and fiscal soundness. And Tracy and her team really do a lot for us in that area. As part of the financial plan, we are recommending some additional resources in our finance department to continue to maintain that strong focus on our financial health and our financial program. So we've got a senior accountant as well as an accounting technician recommended in fiscal year 22, plus some additional, another senior accountant and an accountant in a future year. And then finally, related to employer of choice, and you've heard me say this a few times, I'll say it once more here. You know, we are a service-based organization. What we do is we provide service to our community. We don't make things, we don't sell things. We exist to provide service to our community. Our mission is to provide exceptional service. And we do that through our employees. So if we are to meet our mission and our goals of providing exceptional service, we have to find ways to attract, retain, develop, and equip the best and the brightest to want to come work for our city, for our organization, and provide services to our community. I wish I could tell you that there was one thing that we could do and you just check mark that box and all was well and you've got it under control, but that's not true. There's a lot that goes into becoming and maintaining an organization where people want to work, where you attract the best. And certainly compensation and benefits is part of that equation, but it's certainly not the only thing, far from it. But it is something that we have to talk about and we have to focus on. So council will recall that every other year we do a compensation study for civil service, and then in the other years, general government. This year our focus is on civil service. So I'll just show you right now, and recall, Chief, 15 or 18 down right now?
16, I
16.
believe.
So we're 16 officers, vacancies, not counting officers that are on some kind of light duty or leave, but just totally vacant positions, 16 of our officers. And this is our current starting salary for a police cadet position compared to the starting salary of positions of cities in our region and that we consider our market. In the proposed budget, there are compensation adjustments proposed that would get us to a point where this would be our starting salary for our probationary officer position, and how that would get us into a very market competitive position to help in conjunction with the recruitment efforts that Chief described, as well as again, it's not just about this, but when you're here and all of those other cities are looking like that, this is an element that we have to deal with. On the fire side, we are also looking to reach median level of compensation. We don't experience, thankfully, we do not experience the same staffing challenges in fire. We're 100% staffed and have a list of people that want to join the department, but we do still want to make sure that we're maintaining a focus on being competitive with our salary and benefits for both our police and fire departments.
Are those two things for fiscal year 2022?
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
So, sorry, real quickly.
What's a typical increase? If you'll go back to that slide. So, I mean, obviously everyone else, all these other cities are doing increases also. So, is there sort of a ballpark increase every year, every 2 years? I mean, is it 10%? Is it 8% for public safety? Because we've always talked about with our system of doing it every other year, we work hard in, say, fiscal year 20 to get some significant rate, and we did. I think we spent a couple $1 million extra. And then we roll forward to 2 years and we're, sort of back in. Is that because of our 2-year system? I mean, our every other year system? Is it simply because these peer cities are just outpacing percentage-wise? Maybe they're doing it every year? Or is that too much to cover for 10 minutes later?
Yeah. My opinion is that it primarily has to do with the fact that we're in a hole. We are digging out of a hole.
Always, yeah.
No, not all. I mean, we're closing the gap, and what we will not.
But we've always been in the hole.
Well, for probably 15 years.
Yeah.
We haven't notwithstanding the last few years, but before that, we just hadn't prioritized competitive compensation. We just hadn't. So we were in a position that is very difficult to make up in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years. We're getting there. Like this, especially this, so you will continue to have to pay attention to this and invest in this, but we are making up. We're not just keeping up, we're making up.
Okay.
I think we're getting close to the point where we will be in just a keeping up mode and not a making up mode. So that's, in my opinion, why you've got huge percentages over the last few years. It's just, you just can't close it in 1 year.
Of course, the market's getting away also. The market's accelerating.
Yeah. So when you're trying to close a deep gap and keep up, it's just hard. So, but you have made, I thank you for your leadership and for your willingness to prioritize this, because you have made a big difference, and we are not there yet, but we aren't, I don't think we're going to see for us to continue to come in here like this every year.
At some point back in what you were showing us, we had violent crime in 2028. Do we believe that violent crime is going to stay stable today till 2028?
Well, it's not that that's not a priority, but when you have 40 positions that are requested from one department, not speaking of fire or public works, or we just have to choose a priority level. And so I worked with Chief on that, and I asked him, what are your, if you're in these programs, what's number one, what's number two, what's number three? We do have a violent crime enforcement squad, right?
I know.
So it just has 2 positions that will close it to fully staffed, optimally staffed.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And right now, it actually, in some ways, it doesn't exist because those officers are assigned to patrol because we're so far down in patrol. So these other areas will also prioritizing patrol and getting that where it needs to be will have a domino effect on our other areas. And then I think, not speaking for chief, but I think that's part of the strategy is let's get patrol where it needs to be, which will also allow us to get our other units back to fully staffed and then build from there back to optimal.
And of course, patrol helps to control violent crime before it gets
Patrol
too
is the
violent.
patrol is the backbone of any
Right.
police department.
Okay.
Okay. Last little section here, let's talk about just a few highlights of the actual annual budget. So again, our city charter still requires an annual budget be adopted. So while we present this in the context of a more intentional, longer term view, you still are very concerned with actually appropriating the upcoming fiscal year 22 budget. So you'll see that the proposed budget for all funds totals over $216 million for fiscal year 2022. The vast majority of the increase, 2/3 of it is related to the reinvestment zone number 1 fund, which is, and that increase is related to bond proceeds and the programming of a major bond proceeds program.
And also how the budgets are their financing plan is established. It's not
Right,
that they
different
know.
than, it goes through a different process. Remember that's 8 other taxing entities revenue as well. It's not just the city of Temple. So that when you back that big increase again, which is about 2/3 of it, that's a little bit of a skewing factor. Drilling down to general fund, total expenditures presented at $93 million, total revenues at 89. Again, that gap is us using our fund balance for things that you all have set out in your policy. So it's kind of our, Tracy doesn't like me to say it this way, but I'm going to do it anyways. You save for a car and you pay it with cash instead of paying. So you build up your fund balance and then you spend some of it on major purchases. So it's not deficit spending, it's just saving up and then making a bigger purchase for certain things that you've already approved categories. So that's like capital equipment, things like that. Obviously, property tax, while that's our second largest source of revenue in the general fund, it's always of interest. Right now, we have an estimated property tax rate of 64.25 cents, which is a reduction by a penny. We are still awaiting the certified roll, as we always are at this time of the process. So we have presented that rate based on assumptions, and we will be able to provide a final proposed tax rate once we receive the certified roll towards the end of this month, no later than the 25th of July. And so we believe this is a conservative estimated property tax rate. The budget does have a proposed increase to our solid waste rates. You can see there our peer cities and where Temple falls with the adjustment, the proposed adjustment. San Marcos, Temple, and Waco all have similar service delivery in that we provide once a week trash collection and once a week recycling. Colleen and Bryan don't offer recycling at all, and the rest of the cities offer weekly trash collection, but bi-weekly recycling collection.
So what's the proposed increase?
$1.05 for residential, which would bring the rate to $19.50 per month.
Obviously monthly.
Monthly, yes, ma'am. And then the equivalent percentage for commercial, which is just under 6%, I believe.
Yes.
Drilling down into water and wastewater fund, we have revenues and expenditures presented at a little over 46 million. You can see the blue and gray rings on the revenue side are the charges, so the rates. So the vast majority of revenue for our water and wastewater funds comes from our rate base. We do have a rate adjustment proposed in water and wastewater as well. You can see Temple there with, this is based on a residential water meter with a 8,000 gallon per month usage. So that would show you where we would fall in that range. The first bar is the water portion of the utility rate, and the white bar is the wastewater portion. So that is also proposed. I do want to show you just for information that one of the things that most of our peer cities, all but us and Bryan, do have impact fees that are additional source of revenue for their water and wastewater funds. And this is not something that obviously that we have as part of our revenue source. So while you do see us, on the higher middle of that, the higher median, whatever, Nancy, I'll use your words, of that chart. That's because our entire operating, maintenance, and capital work is supported by our rates and not by any other fees, including impact fees. So this is the residential chart for our peer cities. You can see, so for every new house, this is what a builder would have to pay to those cities. And then this is the commercial side based on a 2-inch meter just on a 2-inch meter. So I did pull our water taps from last year just to get a sense of what kind of revenue that likely represents. And I used Round Rock's impact fees just because they were kind of around the middle ground. And that would have represented about $11.2 million, which is about 24% of our revenue. So I just present that to give some context to the fee increases that we're proposing. And just a summary of some of the highlights for specifically for fiscal year 2022. We talked about all of these things in the financial plan, but I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of the things that would be recommended for the upcoming fiscal year. And quick reminder of our schedule. We do have workshops if needed. We can cover at any level of detail, any topic that you want to see additional information on. August 5th is your first, July 15th is our first public hearing on the city's budget. August 5th is our hearing on the tax rate. And then August 13th, which is a special meeting on a Friday, will be our special day. It's a lucky Friday the 13th to adopt the budget and set the tax rate. So
Who planned that?
I let it get by me this
Oh
time.
my God.
So August 13th is a special meeting, 8:30. Please make sure you mark that on your calendars.
And there are no other discussion periods for council set aside for budget.
We have workshops on July 15th
Right.
and August 5th. And if you want special workshops, then we are more than happy to accommodate. And that's all I have.
It was a lot.
98 minutes. Questions?
How's anybody?
No award.
Very good. We are running 20 minutes late, so I'll bring this